I would like to welcome you here to today's session on behalf of the Friedrich Naumann Foundation. I would like to welcome and say hello to all of you, also on behalf of my partner of today's session, the Media and Law Studies Association from Turkey. Who are we, the Friedrich Naumann Foundation? We are based in Berlin, but we are also liberal political think tanks with 50 offices worldwide. We are working in the areas of economic development, innovation, and digitalization, and especially human rights. We support worldwide NGOs in their important work in order to defend human rights, and especially the freedom of expression, such as the Media and Law Studies Association in Turkey. Freedom of expression includes freedom from censorship. And you will learn more about our session's topic today, how online freedom is being restricted, especially by new social media laws in Russia and in Turkey. Our session will be moderated by Barış Altintaş. And Barış, the floor is yours. I will hand over to you. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, well, thank you for this introduction and your welcoming remarks. Yes, my name is Barış. I work at the Media and Law Studies Association in Turkey, and today I will be moderating this discussion. And we will be discussing the increasing desire of Turkey and Russia to control social media. This is interesting because people who follow both countries notice that things kind of happen around the same time. You know, and this is not only social media, whatever the topic is. You know, if it's anti-LGBT something, then the rest one will follow the next week or the next month. So this is very interesting. And of course, this is a general trend. And but before we start, we have a very short poll on how the audience uses social media and how important it is. So if you could quickly answer the questions, just to, you know, remind us all of the fact that it is very important for any person, not just for journalists or activists, and just to, you know, just to really understand what restricting social media might mean for the average person. And I can't see your answers yet, but I can say I'm just going to share my usage overview. So from my phone. So today it's only 2 p.m. here in Turkey. I've used my phone for 5 hours, and I've used WhatsApp and Reddit, so social media, for about 2.5 hours of that. So that's not very healthy, but I can't see the questions, but I'm going to be so this, you know, comparing to the global average. I don't have any social media statistics on Turkey and Russia, but according to the Digital 2020 survey, and Russians and Turkish people use the internet overall for 7 hours a day. However, again, not knowing the social media statistics. Oh, wait a minute, just the screen. Your responses also came in, but I can't see them. But however, I'll get back to your results soon. Some statistics from the TÜİK, the Turkish statistics agency, say that the average person in Turkey still spends about 6 hours watching TV. And they also say that, you know, they get most of their news from television. And in the case of Russia, you know, where there's again this ongoing hostility against these big tech companies, especially from international agencies, the most widely used statistics, the most widely used social media are actually Kontakte and Odnoklassniki, which are not international companies. So I find this interesting because, you know, Russia and Turkey have been very concerned about what people say on social media, how they use it, but it's not very certain that people actually, you know, use them to, I don't know, overthrow the governments or something. So it's very interesting. And also, you know, both of these countries have many prisoners in jail. Both countries have jailed their opposition leaders, despite very strong European Court of Human Rights decisions in the case of Selahattin Demirtas and Alexei Navalny, for example. And the right to protest is almost non-existent. And everything is pretty much under control. looking from this view. But why are they still regulating social media this much? Because access bans and blockings are common. Do they really need this? So today we will be answering these questions. We'll be trying to answer these questions together, and we will also be looking forward for your input because we might not have the answers. And so today with us, Adrian Shahbaz from Freedom House will be joining us. He's Director for Technology and Democracy. And Freedom House is one of the leading producers of analysis and data on internet freedoms with their annual surveys, Freedom on the Net for us. And we also have Andrei Soldatov and Irina Baragan, who are Russian investigative journalists, and they have I don't even know if they need introduction, but their journalism has focused on Russian security services, and I think they will be sharing this a link with you, that they an article recently they published for the Friedrich Naumann Foundation, but they co-authored a book in 2010 called The New Mobility, focusing on these issues, which is a very good read as well. But so they have a lot of publications, and last but not least, we have Zelal Pelin Doğan, and Zelal is actually a lawyer working at MLSA, and she specifically works on cases of human rights and freedom of the press and freedom of the speech. And most of her clients are journalists who are actually affected by these bans and imprisonments and whatnot. So first, I would like to start with Irina. And Irina, so what is the situation with the social media regulation in Russia right now? How are they approaching, big tech and companies? What are their concerns?
In Russia, there are so much legislation, restrictive legislation on social media and on traditional media was adopted for the last few years, that even for me, a person who are involved in all these issues, even for me, it's very difficult to understand what is allowed and what is prohibited, because everything, literally everything that concerns politics or important matters can be considered as, which you posted on your social media as a journalist or as an individual, can be considered extremism or disrespect to the authorities, or calls for participation in public disorders, which in reality means peaceful demonstrations, and so far and so on. So to operate on your social media as journalists and as an individuals, it's very, very difficult today. The latest, you asked me about the latest developments. The latest developments in this direction. I can give you the full picture of all legislations of Russia, because it takes me like 5 hours, maybe 10 hours. But the latest development was the social media self-regulation law. This law obliged the social media to monitor preemptively the whole content on, say, Facebook, Twitter, Odnoklassniki, and to shut down all the content that can be considered as illegal. I told that illegal content, according to the Russian legislation, may be anything from really illegal content like information on drugs or child porno, to any kind of critique to the authorities, and any kind of any information about peaceful demonstrations, or even just some kind of radical opinion on any issues. My favorite examples of crazy implementation of all this law happened a few years ago. A man was sent to prison for posting on his Facebook a picture of toothpaste with this caption, "Squeeze Russia out of yourself." We Russians, we understand the long, which is, this is a metaphor, and this is a reference to Anton Chekhov's quotation. But really, what does it mean? It means nothing. Squeeze Russia out of yourself. It's, I don't know, it's satire. It's not harmful to the authorities, to anybody, but a man was sent to prison for a few years for this.
Okay, well, yes, this also sounds very similar to Turkey. I'm sure Zelal will be sharing similar examples that are absurd. But on the other side of this coin is surveillance. So this is where I want to go to Andrei. So what is this? How are how is the Russian state doing on surveillance? Are they really intercepting communications? Who are they listening to? What do they want to find out?
Well, it's getting more and more effective with years. So we have in place a very intrusive system of targeted surveillance, which is basically a system of backdoors. Every Russian internet service provider is required by law to have a backdoor and to give access to Russian security services to provide access to premises and cables and databases completely unrestricted and with no way to control what is actually accessed and what kind of information intercepted. But right now, I would say that the Russian authorities put this on the next level because we have a new system of the so-called sovereign internet, which is a combination of two things. It's a surveillance, but it's also censorship, and it's also gives an authority a tool to redirect the traffic from a particular region or to a particular region. And it works like that. If you have some problems in, say, Siberia in the Far East, and you do not want this protest to spread to other regions, you can cut off the internet connection to this region or out of this region. And it's extremely effective. The other option we have for this system is that the devices which excuse me, were introduced and installed on the premises of all internet service providers in the country helped the authorities to put more pressure on global platforms like Twitter. And this spring, we saw how Twitter was slowing down in the country thanks to this system, because they started using these devices. And it's basically it's deep packet inspection. And this technology provides you with the opportunity to redirect the traffic or to take down some particular traffics. But it also helps you to look into the traffic and to identify particular ways, particular kinds of traffics or particular messages. And so the Russian system of surveillance is getting better and better. And in combination with all the restriction legislation we already have in place, to be honest, the picture is looking quite bleak right now. And the other problem is the last one, which I wanted to mention, that Russia is one of the very few countries where local social media are much more popular than global media. So we still have Kontakte and Odnoklassniki really popular. So of course we have Facebook and Twitter and Google, and they're still accessible for users, but they are not that popular. And the problem with local social media that they are cooperating very closely with Russian security services. And with many cases, actually with 98% of the cases of prosecution of the users of social media, we have the cases of the users of the Russian social media.
Okay, this is an interesting statistic, but I have a question which might not be very informed and educated, but about these deep package inspections and service providers using them. Isn't this very costly as an infrastructure? How are the local companies dealing with this? Or because you said it got effective, is it financially doable, or how are these companies? What stage are they at?
Yeah, it's actually a very good question, because for many years, and it started literally in the 1990s, the FSB, the Russian security service, tried to, and actually was quite successful at pushing pressure on the ISPs to install these devices and swarm devices back then, surveillance devices, and to force the companies pay for these devices. And that actually caused a lot of noise from Russian telecommunication industry, because they didn't want to pay for these devices, because these devices should be constantly updated. But recently, the Kremlin learned this lesson. So for the new system of the sovereign internet, the government said that we are ready to pay, and we are ready to send you these devices and to deliver these devices to you. And that would give us the leverage, so you have no way to say no. But it also gives the government the opportunity to control these devices remotely from Moscow. So very first time in our history, we have literally the center specifically built in Moscow, where you can control the traffic all over the country and remotely play with this traffic. So if you have some problems in Siberia, some problems in Central Russia, we have some protests, or maybe even a natural catastrophe, and you want to limit access of people outside of this region to this kind of information, you now have this option, and you can do that remotely.
Well, that is very alarming, and it sounds very much something like Turkey would do. You know, we'll pay for you for your. And actually, the funny thing is that when the government says we'll pay for you, we're actually paying, you know, as taxpayers from our own pockets for this censorship. And that's again one of those points where I can't relate to this, but I can completely understand this approach that the government has. And this is something that might also come up in Turkey, where I think this surveillance and interception part is not very effective. I can say, you know, based on the indictments we've seen after the coup attempt, there weren't many, you know, intercepted emails or whatever. Every digital document, pretty much in thousands of pages of indictment we've seen. Any information that was exchanged online would be basically seized by seizing a physical device. So I think Turkey doesn't have this infrastructure, or but if they get this idea, they'll find ways. So so this I want to turn to Zelal here. So what is going on in Turkey? What is this social media law? Because they you know, on the regular they've been blocking news reports, especially about Erdogan's family, and like Irina said, it's not very clear what is allowed and what is not. You know, there's it's very hard to navigate, especially for journalists and activists. What is the situation?
As we know, Turkey is going through a time frequent restrictions of the right to freedom of expression and the press. And actually, I was also thinking where to start to talk about, and I think it would be good to mention 2016 and say a few words about the new internet law, because in the aftermath of the coup attempt of 15 July, at least almost 200 media outlets have been closed down. Approximately over 2,000 journalists lost their jobs, and dozens of journalists have been arrested, and the government control on printed media outlets increased to 95%. And given the continuously intensifying pressure on the offline and online media outlets, independent journalists have started to convey their news reports to their audience mainly on the internet, using social media platforms instead of traditional press organizations. In parallel, citizens seeking channels for independent news and for free expression like this turn to social media. Among them are many social groups and human rights activists that are enabled to make their voices heard in the government-controlled mainstream media. And then social media has turned into a public space in Turkey, where many social segments meet. Different voices can be heard, and journalists can share their news. Now, at the moment, Facebook has 37 million users in Turkey, and Twitter 13.6 million. In an attempt to catch up with this new digital reality, the government has started to also target the internet, the sole remaining channel to share different options. In addition to trials of thousands of people for their posts on the internet, access ban to websites, and content removals, a new law tightening the use of social media platforms has been adopted in July 2020. This new regulation, known as social media law, entered into force last October. It creates the category of social network providers for real or legal entities, allowing users to create, view, or share online content, such as text, visual content, voice recordings, and locations online for social interaction purposes. And consequently, it also introduces a range of obligations for online platforms such as Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, which fall under the category of social network providers. And in line with the new legislation, all foreign-based social network providers with more than 1 million daily accesses from Turkey are obligated to appoint a legal representative in the country. Moreover, the social network providers are required to store the data of their users from Turkey inside the country. The local storage of personal data results in the possibility of judicial and administrative authorities to recase this data.
Sela, can I ask a question here about this? So these social media companies in Turkey, YouTube, Twitter, they have all said, yes, we're coming to Turkey, right? So
yes.
This is how do lawyers see this? So when you just said that, they have to share local data of people, but will Turkey be able to follow this on, for example, in the case of people using VPNs? And secondly, one other thing is that, for example, what in Russia, right, Twitter didn't take off content, or maybe they did, but they weren't slow, and so they used these deep inspection packages and slowed them down, and there are things, but for example, if Turkey wants an account to be shut down, how is that legally possible? I mean, if the person is Turkey or in France, for example, we have a lot of exiled journalists in Germany. So how and they say, oh, shut this account down, so remove it from the platform. Can they do it physically? I mean, legally, that's what the law says, but is it possible?
With any regulation, yes, it's possible. And for example, the government claims to protect citizens with these days laws, the personal data, citizens' personal data, for combating cybercrime and hate speech with this new law. And the most important thing, when the draft law was discussed in the parliament, the government said that there are such regulations in many European countries, especially in Germany. But I think the enthusiasm of adapting such regulations in Europe to Turkey leads to more oppressive results here. Actually, from the submission of the draft law, as you know, into Parliament in July 2020, until today, this social media law has remained strongly contested. NGOs, journalists, and activists working to protect the news and freedom of expression called repeatedly for social media companies not to comply with the law. And they were calling it, and they are still calling it, the censorship law. And they drew attention to its role of taking censorship to a more suffocating level and of creating potentially dangerous consequences for citizens by completely removing the data security.
Okay,
And
data security is then, can I just right here, I want to go to Adrian. And so this is an interesting point, you know, the compliance of these social media companies. Unfortunately, none of their representatives are here with us. But Adrian, do you, does Freedom House research find that, you know, stricter or authoritarian countries are, end up passing increasingly similar laws to control social media? And secondly, how are the big tech companies approaching this? Are they saying okay at some point like they did in Turkey? You know, how are things globally?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. We are seeing common approaches among authoritarian governments around regulating social media. I think the aspects of that playbook are many things that Andre, Irina, and Zelal have mentioned around, you know, data localization, anti-encryption measures, changing intermediary liability laws, or forcing companies to quickly remove what they call illegal content, appointing a local representative. So I think these are all parts of that playbook that we're seeing spread around the world. This is often combined with the tactic of blocking or throttling social media platforms as a means to coerce these companies to do the government's bidding. So it's essentially governments are doing all that they can to, I think, increase their leverage over social media companies so that they can force them into complying with demands for censorship or to hand over data. And they do that by threatening to just prevent access at all to the country, which, you know, would have disastrous economic consequences, but also for their users would have disastrous consequences for, you know, access to information, media freedom, and free expression. I should say, you know, you mentioned how are companies dealing with it. And I think, you know, I don't have a secret window into their own processes, but I do know that in 2020, for example, Facebook agreed to remove so-called anti-government or anti-state content in Vietnam. That's a country where internet freedom has declined in recent years. You've had state-owned telecoms that were constantly threatening to throttle access to Facebook. And so Facebook essentially, it appears, had a choice of essentially remaining accessible in the country or complying with some form of censorship from the government. I should also mention, though, that these measures in this playbook is not only being introduced in countries in our methodology that are ranked as not free, they're also there in partly free and also free countries. And I think the big example from the past year or so is in India, where both democracy and internet freedom have declined in recent years. And there, the government has just implemented something called the Information Technology Rules of 2021, which, you know, no surprise, forces tech companies to appoint a representative and allows the government to restrict access to platforms that do not comply with takedown requests. There's also this second component of the law in India, which mimics something that we had seen from many of the Five Eyes governments, which are, you know, the experts in intelligence and surveillance. And that is, in the Indian law, compels tech platforms to retain user data for 180 days, even after users' accounts have been deleted. And importantly, to identify the so-called first originator of encrypted messages. And that's something that WhatsApp is actually challenging in court. So this is an example where in a more, let's say, partly free country where rule of law exists, the judiciary does have a little bit more independence. We are seeing companies use the legal system in order to challenge this whenever possible. But yes, this is something that we're seeing, I think, spread to all countries along the democratic spectrum in different ways.
So yeah, this is very interesting. And I just a quick question, one question about India. Do you, you know, given the judicial structures of the country, does WhatsApp's lawsuit have any chance, really? This is Or I mean, are the judges going to look at this technically? Oh, if they do this, they can't do encryption anymore, so it can't be done. Or are they going to be, or for any of these other countries, what remains as legal recourse? Is it there actually?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have seen some positive successes around, strategic litigation. In India, the judiciary has been, has a mixed record. I think that there was a very landmark case a few years ago where they outlined they defined the rights of privacy in India. And similarly, there has been quite a bit of tension between the judiciary and the government in the country. The question is whether the government cares, whether the administration there is willing essentially to surpass checks and balances and the Constitution in order to force to not comply with the judiciary. That's something that we've seen around with the Aadhaar biometric ID system in the country. But I think more broadly, we have seen some good examples from Brazil, from Indonesia, and even in Sudan, and in Pakistan, where we have seen the courts being used in a way to let's say, push forward, to reverse a negative law or to enshrine human rights online.
Well, I think in the case of Turkey and Russia, this this is a bit different. Sometimes you get good court decisions, but most of the time they're very integrated to the state. This is not about of course, independence of judiciary, but speaking for these two countries, I think it is a major problem enabling these governments to continue, because the courts rarely surprise us, unfortunately, because how the system is ingrained. But it's good to know that there's hope in other countries. And so I want to go back to Irina and Andrei with a question. But also I want to open the floor to any questions or comments so we will be now seeking answers to maybe what can be done. And as I said initially, we don't all have the answers at all times. So if you have any questions or any comments, if you want to share experiences, please do. They don't necessarily need to be questions. We're very open to ideas, but because more on the technical side. So Irina and Andrei, what can journalists or users, is there anything that can be done as a user? I know, maybe improve yourself technically to I know, work around these surveillance or censorship, or when it gets to a level of where they're using good software, good technology, like where Russia is going, where China, we don't have any chances, or what? Is there anything that can be done?
The problem you described has two parts. The first part is it is about public speech. If you wanna say something publicly, if you wanna publish something as a journalist, you can be anonymous. So it means all technical solutions are useless for you, because you want to be listened to by by a lot of people. The second part of the problem is when you wanted to communicate secretly with your sources as a journalist, and you want to avoid surveillance. This problem, so far in Russia, you can solve this problem using a lot of technical tools like messengers as Signal, and even WhatsApp is quite safe in Russia. And also you can use encryption and many other technical tools to avoid surveillance. But the authorities, because Russia is a country of total surveillance, and techniques that authorities use are extremely advanced, sometimes it's difficult because your devices can be infected by virus and you can't avoid surveillance. You can be physically stopped with your devices at the borders or at the street by the police, and your devices can be stripped of you and searched by the authorities, which is also, of course you can encrypt part of your information, but when you're under physical pressure of the police, you can't save your your passwords. You have to give your passwords then, and so. But it depends. It depends. You can't communicate with your sources anonymously still.
And maybe taking it offline a little bit. I don't know where the, also the picture that Adrian drew is where the world is. Of course, the internet is always evolving. The users or technical people find new ways, governments find new ways, and the use of signal has also increased in Turkey. But in general, I'm not sure if the general journalist population is very knowledgeable about these. Not only knowledgeable, but there's also user habits that are hard to change. So maybe part of it is for us to basically be more smart about our internet usage. And there are also some comments that I just want to go through. So Katice Rodriguez wrote, our legal analysis of Turkish internet regulation from EFF, if everybody can see this link. And thank you for sharing this. And Ena Omerovic also shared information. I want to point out that next week we will release an episode on digital censorship and social media content removal in Turkey, and what individuals can do in response to it, which is, yes, the answer that we're looking for. Well, thank you for this. And also the link is in the chat. I don't know if everybody can see that. I think so. And so yes, these are questions for everyone. But in terms of your experience, Stella, would you say that journalists or lawyers also who have come under attack are more aware of these, I don't know, ways to protect themselves? And secondly, how can you protect yourself on social media legally? Or is there any chance of this at all?
And you asked this question to whom?
I asked it to Zila.
So sorry, yes. Actually, I think that the freedom of expression and the internet freedoms are endangered for many years in Turkey. And as I said, or as I saw, in the eyes of the Turkish civil society organizations, including MLSA, and for example, the new social media law is an attempt on the part of the government to monopolize the information flow online and to expose citizens to stricter surveillance and control. Actually, what I point out that, in fact, the pressure on social media in Turkey is increasing in cases of emergency. And what I think and what we see, especially at the time of military operations or corruption investigations or any prosecution or anything else about the president's family. In this situation, the government blocks access to the internet, and also many social media users are under investigations and prosecutions for making terrorist propaganda or insulting. And yes, we are trying to protect and promoting the internet freedoms and freedom of expression of citizens or everyone. And in this context, we as MLSA object to these access ban decisions, and if necessary, we apply also to the Constitutional Court and Strasbourg Court to combat the censorship. And I think that social media is one of the most indispensable channels of our age. And therefore, I would like to point out that international solidarity and struggle against all kinds of censorship are important. And it's really bad to say that, but I think the government will continue to block the internet access and will continue to pressure to the citizens and their freedom of expression and freedom of press, and so we have to try to combat against that.
So it's very depressing, but we have a very good question. And then, yes, we partially touched upon this. So Tatiana Margolin is asking, is there any potential in working with platforms? You all touched on this, but can you address this more explicitly? This is a good question. And also if the audience has any views on this, but are platforms friends, foes? Can we work with them? What are your thoughts on this? Andre, Irina, Adrian, if you have anything to add. This is very interesting.
Finally, it's something more optimistic. Well, actually, even Facebook, I should admit, is responding to Russian journalists' request, and if something is taken down because, say, trolls report to you falsely that you posted something like a naked picture, and it's not the case, but some algorithms of Facebook take your page down. Well, usually Facebook responds to this request and get back your access to your page, and it's getting better. With WhatsApp, we have the same story that actually Facebook is responsive. Even with Twitter, I would say that the picture is a bit more optimistic than the Russian authorities try to present it. So the Russian authorities claimed victory, saying like Twitter removed and took down all the messages, all the posts they wanted to remove. But actually, it's about the protest which took place in February. And well, of course, it's still the case, but I think the interesting thing is that it's not going on live. So it's not going on right now. Like when you have protests going on, and the Russian authorities would love to have a direct line of communication to Twitter to ask them to take down messages to the protests which are going on right now. But it's not what is going on. With Google also, yes, we have YouTube going under immense pressure. And right now we have courts fining Google for more and more and more. And it's at the end of the year, we expect Google to be fined for $1 billion, maybe more. And all in order to force it into cooperation. But so far, it's not very successful. And also, we need to remember two things, that usually this pressure on global platforms goes in two directions. One direction is taking down messages and posts. And in this area, it's slightly, well, I would say successful. But the second option, the second direction the Russian government wants to pursue is to force global platforms to share personal data and communications which are private. And so far, I would say it very carefully, global platforms resist this pressure. So I never heard of any case prosecuted by the authorities where you have like WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger data or Twitter data presented to the court, which is a good sign.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. I agree with this, but also just taking on from this, Adrian, is I asked you this question earlier. So there's some positivity, and they are not very openly willing to share user data. That's why they're pressured, like Andre very nicely summarized. But there's also been a criticism of platforms. Again, of course, we don't know, they're not here, but of, for example, the protests in Palestine, or the farmer protests in India, in Colombia, other parts. So there's also that aspect where they seem to be, I don't know, seem to be basically knowingly or unknowingly. This is not an indictment of any platform. This can also work against us as well. So how does that work in other countries, Adrian, with the platforms? Yes, they have a positive role, but do they also have a negative role, especially for countries like Turkey and Russia, or of course there are no other countries like Turkey and Russia, but but who are in that stricter authoritarian direction?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a similar trend. I think, you were talking about the events that happened, in Palestine recently, and the from all that we can say from the outside, what appears to be like a lot of censorship against the speech of Palestinian activists or even just ordinary Palestinians, people in diaspora who were using hashtags around the conflict. I would note that, what tends to happen is that when platforms are oftentimes caught off guard, then they do invest resources and people into remedying that situation, particularly when it causes a public relations crisis. And so I saw just today, I believe that Twitter, for example, has just brought Hamle, which is a Palestinian digital rights organization, which has been doing a lot of the great documentation of unjustifiable takedowns of Palestinian speech. They've brought that organization onto their Trust and Safety Council as part of their broader human rights initiative. So I think that there is a lot of room, there is some room for optimism here in terms of when there are these instances when we see platforms failing to meet their obligations under business and human rights principles, after they come under quite a bit of pressure. And I think that's the role of civil society essentially, is to provide that oversight of platforms in a way that may lead to better outcomes than when governments get involved, because we have the examples from Turkey, from Russia, and from others of how government regulation tends to incentivize the removal of not only illegal speech, but as we see even in democracies like the UK, of speech that could be deemed as harmful but not illegal. So it's a very complex balance to be played around essentially how can we, among people in civil society, play to almost, let's say, use the tensions between governments and platforms as a way to make it a race to the top, and to, at times where pressure, particularly in democracies around regulation, has led to better outcomes in terms of self-regulation, but then also insisting when there are these instances around, encryption or data localization, or undermining intermediary liability, where civil society can also be on the side of platforms when relevant. So I think it's never just believing that platforms are the best and always the best protectors of free expression, but I think rallying around building a coalition when appropriate in order to defend users, to defend human rights on the platform. And I think that we have started to see some progress, particularly around Facebook, that I think has been investing a lot in terms of creating a human rights framework, hiring directors for human rights and a whole team that is devoted to that, and then also mainstreaming these issues within their public policy.
Okay, that sounded a bit more hopeful, but we don't have much time. So if you have any questions or comments, but now I want to ask one more painful question to both Andre, Irina, and Zeynel. So all of these are happening. What are platforms doing? What are democracies? But my question is, do people care? Because in Turkey, of course, there's huge generational differences for younger people, what they call Generation Z. These are very important. But for some other people, when in countries such as ours, where people are a bit more polarized or populism is in place, then they can buy into these arguments. For example, one of you said that Germany is also doing it, or these platforms are the West is trying to undermine our country, whatever. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people, because watching state news and because there's no free media, are under the impression that the government might be right, they're protecting us. So do users really care about these restrictions? A majority of them, it's a hard question, and I know there's generational differences, but
it depends. The Kremlin introduced the first system of internet filtering 8 years ago, even in 2012. It's now 9 years ago. And back then, they started censoring internet very lazily, and they did not took down a lot of information back then, and it was very easy to circumvent this censorship. Back then, people told us that most of people told us that they did not pay attention to this censorship because there are so much information on the internet. But situations has worsened since then, and like 200 people now are under criminal investigations because of their postings on social networks, and it's huge number. So people who are involved in some kind of political activity or people who are active on social networks, they care. But 80% of population, I think, and it's not depends of the age, they don't pay attention. It's also in Russia, we have a huge divide between Moscow, big cities like Moscow, St. Petersburg, Yekaterinburg, cities which is bigger than 1 million, which has a population bigger than 1 million people. And this is a one story. These people, they are much more knowledgeable about what's going on the net, and they pay attention to internet filtering. And people in Russian provinces who are just, I say, how to put it, not to be offensive to them, then most of them, they just don't pay attention what's going on, because it does not interfere into their private life.
I would add only one thing, that sometimes the government helped us to promote the need for using VPNs and circumvention tools, because sometimes they made really stupid mistakes. We spent lots of time trying to explain people why they need to use VPNs, and they always say something like, well, we don't care. And one very perfect day, the Russian government decided to ban Pornhub. And immediately, our country raised to the position #1 in the number of users of Tor. Just happened in one day, because all these people in all these offices, they just got it, but they cannot go to the beloved Pornhub. The government then canceled this ban, but it was already too late. With the COVID pandemic, we got the same problem. Nobody paid attention in the country to face recognition system. And then we got video surveillance system. And all of a sudden we got COVID, and we got thousands of people fined because they were identified breaking the regulation. And it's quite, they were fined on substantial sums. And all of a sudden ordinary people started talking about why we have so many face recognition cameras, why we have such an intrusive system of social monitoring applications, why we are forced to install all these apps if we got contracted COVID, and why they fine us, and why they ask us to take pictures of us at 3 in the morning and send it to some Russian censors to check that we are still at home. So sometimes we do these mistakes, and it's quite good for, for the society.
This is interesting, because this security thing, sorry, Zelal, I know you wanted to say a word as well, but these security cameras, yes, they, or, downloading apps, they over time can work against you. And this was a discussion in Turkey when they started, putting out all these cameras on the city called Mobese. And, this is good for your security. And then after a while, if you lose your wallet, then the camera didn't work. But if you were in Gezi protests, then they were easily identified in protests. And now people see this, and and actually, unfortunately, their real life examples can be very good teachers as well. So there's also that is about the, also then there's a comment about this, the fact that the wider audience does not care, from Ena Omera, which again is very much related to ignorance. And there are, media and digital literacy could be one of the answers. Yes, of course, this is again tied to media freedoms, where people are watching this, I don't know, A Haber, this state channel, Pervi Kanal, and they don't have this other, it's not even ignorance, it's just a different planet, I think, meant mindfully there on. And also Berivan Oruçoğlu asked another question, again about the platform. Is there anything that the international community can do to help beyond statements? And okay, this we don't know, but could they pressure social media companies, etc.? Yes, Adrian, maybe you could tackle this question. can social media companies be, I don't know, be affected by the international community in any way?
Well, I think we're already seeing that. I think that the policies and practices of social media companies have changed a lot over the past 10 years and over the past 5 years and a few years. So pressure always does help. I think at the same time, let's say that democracies particularly should be helping and supporting social media companies when it's relevant. So when social media companies are coming under attack from the Russian government, from the Turkish government, from the Indian government, seeing it as in an interest of human rights for these governments to be actually applying pressure on those governments, not to be passing laws that restrict freedom of expression or pass, greater data collection and surveillance. And I think it's also interesting it's important to remember that even within governments, there are different departments. And so, it's not accurate to say that because the United States government is, on the one hand, through the intelligence agencies seeking to spy on virtually everybody in the world, but there are also, departments within the United States government that are trying to do the opposite. That are trying to protect a free and open internet, to protect internet freedom. And so I think that there are ways that we can be building coalitions among certain governments or among certain, policymakers and people within government and social media companies and civil society in order to be pushing back against some of these laws, so that social media companies in the end aren't just then. I think the alternative scenario is that we might live in a world where basically international social media companies are blocked in almost every country, and instead each country has its own local social media company that instead complies much more closely with the local government.
Yes, I think that seems to be happening in some other places, and Turkey is also attempting. So I want to go back to Zelal with that other question, because I'm also not sure. And this is something again we can discuss. Do people in Turkey care about these restrictions? What do you think?
Yes. Actually, I think the internet access has an important role, especially in these times in Turkey, after the Sedat Peker videos, which is a mafia leader exposing the illegal actions of the government. And after the sharing, his videos became a popular figure in Turkey. This is just not about his words or his personality. This is also about to get information about the government actions. And then I think besides of the security cameras, internet restrictions, or access ban decisions, we forgot something, because social media and freedom of the internet is not only important for the following the news or anything else, because of course it's also very important for socializing or get connected, especially in COVID times. Because of that, people really care about the internet freedoms and any restriction against these freedoms.
Yeah, well, yes, maybe there's a tiny bit of difference in terms of users in Turkey and Russia, and especially of this mafia leader that we're a proud moment for Turkey, where we have given the world this term deep state, and now its ex-members are talking about the government, and he became a phenomenon. Millions of his YouTube videos, like a single video is watched 3 million times within the first 10 minutes. So yes, it's crazy, and and he always addresses young generation. He always says, "I'm talking to people under 40," right? Although he's of course a murderous I don't know, mafia leader. But so it's, I think, time for us to wrap up, because I'm being told that we're running out of time, and then these meetings are back to back. But thank you very much, all of you, for sharing your views, and it was very interesting. And Angelina, great to have you guys here today. And thank you for, we're always following you. And also Zelal for everything, and Adrian, your guys' reports also. These are also, very important for us, because with all the data and analysis, we can also get a better view of, how these things are evolving, be it in populist or democratic governments or whatever, and what we can do. And so thank you so much. Thank you very much for your time and sharing your valuable insights. And I think we're out of time. Or if not, if you want to add anything, I think we have like 30 seconds left.
No, just thank you.
Thank you for having us
Yeah,
here.
thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thanks to the audience for their contributions and questions.